Hello everyone and welcome to the local campaign. I'm Francis D'Souza from City News. On October 19th, Canada will elect the 42nd Parliament, and Rogers TV is the only station producing debates of all of Toronto's 25 ridings. For the next hour, you'll hear from the candidates of York South-Weston. 2015 marks the beginning of electoral riding redistribution, so boundaries in the majority of ridings have changed, along with some riding names. So before I introduce the candidates, let's take a closer look at the newly redrawn riding of York South-Weston.
The riding of York South-Weston is bordered on the north by Highway 401, a CP rail line to the south. It stretches from the Humber River on the west to portions of Connie Street, Rogers Road, and a GO Transit rail line on the east. Neighborhoods in this riding include Weston, Amesbury, Mount Dennis, and Silverthorne. Some recognizable landmarks: the open green space at Eglinton Flats, the York Civic Centre, Weston Collegiate, and York Memorial Collegiate. NDP member Mike Sullivan is the riding's incumbent MP.
So let's meet our candidates now, and each will have 1 minute to make their opening statement. This will be done in the order of the most seats by party in the House of Commons. So we begin first with Mike Sullivan of the NDP. Mike.
Thank you, Francis. I am the incumbent MP. I am your neighbor. I have lived in the riding for the past 23 years, and I have been an active member of the various community groups that exist in this riding. For the past 4.5 years, I have taken your cases to Ottawa. I have tried to advocate on behalf of the participants of the riding for the constituents. I have communicated with you effectively. I have listened to your concerns, and I have brought them to Ottawa. I have effectively represented you by achieving some safety issues in the riding, by achieving some job issues in the riding, and by trying to make sure that everyone in the riding is represented when it comes to their immigration needs, their servicing needs, their housing needs. We have thousands of people that come to my office every day, and I don't turn any of them away. I look forward to representing you in the next Parliament, and I look forward to your vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And Ahmed, you're next from the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Francis. My name is Ahmed Hussen, and I'm the Liberal candidate in York South-Weston. I'm running because I believe that the opportunities that were available to me growing up in Canada are declining and vanishing for the vast majority of people in ridings like York South-Weston. I used public transit. I lived in social housing in order to go to university, and through that experience I learned the importance of community resources as a way to get ahead. Social mobility is becoming harder and harder for young people and for adults in communities like York South-Weston. As a lawyer, as a former housing advocate, and as a small business owner in York South-Weston, I'll make sure that I represent the interests of residents in York South-Weston who are part of my community, and I'll continue to work hard for them, as I do now as an advocate and as an immigration and human rights lawyer, and I can do that more effectively as an MP. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Let's go next to John Johnson from the Green Party.
My name's John Johnson. I'm with the Green Party. The reason why I chose the Green Party, they believe in making the environment a better, safer place. My background is basically in security. I've spent roughly about 30, 40 years in security. I am also a neighbor in York South-Weston. I've lived there at least 3-4 decades. In security, I find that protecting the individuals' property and the individuals themselves is relatively important. If I'm chosen to be MP, protecting and serving the public is one of my greatest ambitions. I have no qualms about helping people, and in many cases in security, that's what you do day to day. In order to provide security for individuals, you have to be aware of the possibilities and think in advance of what the constituents will require.
Thank you, John. Let's move next to Stephen Lepone from the Libertarian Party.
Francis, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'd like to thank both Rogers TV for hosting this debate, and I'd also like to thank you, the viewers at home, for tuning in and learning more about the issues that matter. Because quite frankly, folks, this election matters. Canada has once again fallen into recession, and the Canadian dollar is at its weakest level in the past decade. The past 9 years under the Harper Conservatives, we've had 7 deficits, 2 major recessions, and countless broken promises. What we need right now is change, but we aren't going to achieve that change by voting back into power the same parties who helped get us into this mess in the first place. We need real change. And today, I'm here to present that. My name is Steve Lepone, and I represent the Libertarian Party, Canada's fastest growing political movement. We have made inroads all across the country by speaking to voters and getting out our message of individual freedom and personal liberty. We believe that by maximizing individual liberties and minimizing the role of government in our lives, we can make Canada a better place for all of us.
Thank you, Steve. And I also want to let you know that we did invite the Conservative candidate, James Robinson, to join us today, but he did decline that invitation. So now we're going to begin with our question and answer period of the debate. Each candidate will be given 30 seconds to respond, followed by the discussion. And the person who will answer the question first will be chosen at random. So let us begin. Are we ready? Okay, our first question is really specific to this riding. And with the lowest average household income in the GTA, many people in York South-Weston strive to get out of poverty. But for young people, it is a struggle which doesn't seem to be getting any easier. Student debt remains at an all-time high. At the same time, Toronto youth unemployment for those 15 to 24 has been trending upwards since the early 2000s, reaching its peak at 21% in 2012 before falling to the current level, 18.1%. So what measures can government take to improve the prospects of young people? And John, let's begin with you.
Well, the Green Party and myself, we believe that the only possible way of getting more jobs is creating green environmental projects. A lot of those can be housing. I believe that York South-Weston is an older community. Housing and renovation to homes would definitely increase some job positions. I'd like to see a lot more scientists do a lot more study, create data, so that new and small business can have a chance to survive in a big economy.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at it, like what you said, Francis, York South-Weston is one of the poorest ridings in all of Ontario. We need a real plan that is going to help put more money back directly into the wallets of the people of York South-Weston and for all Canadians. And I mean, when you look at the plans of both the Liberals and the NDP, what they want to do is increase CPP contributions and increase payroll taxes. And personally, we don't believe that that is the way to go about increasing incomes. So here's what our plan is. We want to go about decreasing the tax rates for all Canadians.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off there. That was your 30 seconds. You'll have a chance, don't worry, to get a lot of your platform out during the open discussion. But let's go next to Mike.
Thanks. It's a very good question, Francis, and it's exactly what our party has been focused on, is creating jobs for youth. We believe that one of the most important ways we can do that is through our infrastructure spending. The federal government and the provincial government are spending billions on infrastructure. We intend to spend billions on infrastructure, but we will tie that infrastructure spending to the creation of good local jobs, including apprenticeships for local youth. There will have to be, as a contractor working on an infrastructure project, you will have to create apprenticeships for local youth.
Okay, thank you. And Ahmed.
The most effective way to create jobs in ridings like York South-Weston is to invest in communities. The Liberal Party is committed to spending record amounts of money on infrastructure and cutting taxes for the middle class and those that are working to join the middle class, and also giving more money to families, putting more money in their pockets under our fairness plan. Those 3 measures will inevitably create jobs in York South-Weston.
Okay, and the floor is open for a discussion or a challenging of ideas.
Yeah, if I may, Francis, I mean, we have a real plan that is going to help directly put more money back into the wallets, not only of the people of York South-Weston, but of all Canadians. And this is how we're going to do it. We are going to reduce income tax rates for all Canadians. Right now, the income tax structure is not working for middle-class families. We are going to reduce the federal income tax rate to a flat tax of 15% for all Canadians. Additionally, we are going to take the current personal income tax exemption, which is currently $11,500, and we're going to increase that to $17,300. What that means is that for the first $17,300 that you earn, it will be completely tax-free at the federal level. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to look at income tax credits and deductions, and we have 4 key credits that we think are really going to help the people of York South-Weston. 1 for children, 1 for students, 1 for seniors, and 1 for those with disabilities. Each of those are going to be valued at $4,000. We think that that's the key way to go about increasing incomes in these neighborhoods. I mean, I've talked to hundreds of voters in York South-Weston, and they tell me that right now they are concerned with being able to make rent and pay their bills. And so by focusing on pensions or infrastructure, that's not the way to do it. People need to feed their families, you know, right now. And so
Mike, you're itching to jump in. Go ahead.
I am itching to jump in, thanks. It's all well and good to talk about cutting taxes, but cutting taxes doesn't help anybody who doesn't have a job, because they don't pay taxes in the first place. And the riding, although the figures you gave were about between 18 and 24%, I suspect the youth unemployment in the riding of York South-Weston is significantly higher than that. And before anybody worries about having their taxes cut when they're not paying taxes, the first thing they want to know is, where is the job going to come from? How am I going to be employed? How am I going to actually find something for my children to do as the children graduate university or graduate school? The NDP believes that we are spending a small fortune on infrastructure, and with good reason. But we need to tie that infrastructure spending to the creation of good jobs. We also need to start recreating the industries that used to exist in York South-Weston. York South-Weston used to be home to tens of thousands of good manufacturing jobs. Those manufacturers have been allowed by various governments over the past to disappear, and their lands turned into housing. We think there's enough land left to create green centers of excellence so that we can start building the green economy of the future right in York South-Weston and employ people in the factories, in the plants that will build the green infrastructure of the future. We can't do that without some kind of federal nudge to create the impression that York South-Weston is open for business, and York South-Weston wants to get back to its roots of having plenty of good, middle-class jobs in the riding.
The problem with that approach, on the surface, it sounds great to invest in infrastructure. The problem is you're not putting the money there. You're putting $3.6 billion over 10 years in transit when the Liberal Party is putting $20 billion. $3.6 billion over 10 years works out to $360 million a year. That's not enough for municipalities to really invest in infrastructure related to transit. The same goes for social housing. The same goes for roads and bridges. So the NDP plan sounds great, but the problem is the money simply isn't behind it because of your vow to run balanced budgets. So that's the holdback. What the Liberal Party is saying is we will run modest deficits for 3 years, 10 billion for the first 2, and then a modest amount of 2.9 billion for the third one, in order to make those critical investments now, instead of waiting for many years to address these issues. It's great to talk about infrastructure, but the money simply isn't there.
But the money is there. We have different priorities than either of the two mainstream parties. The Liberals and the Conservatives both believe that large corporations that are now presently sitting on $650 billion of dead money sitting in their vaults and have created any jobs in retrospect. We've given them lots and lots of tax breaks, and they haven't created the jobs. The whole notion of cutting the taxes for the big corporations was because they would create jobs. It didn't work. Our priority is to make sure that we balance budgets, that we change the priorities of giving tax breaks to large corporations. We change the priority of giving money to the oil companies in the tar sands because they don't need it. They're making lots of money. Even at $47 a barrel, they're still making lots of money in the tar sands. We need to change our priorities and spend the money in ways that will provide the greatest benefit for Canadians. We need to invest in our healthcare system. We need to invest in our cities. We need to invest in our towns and villages as well. We need to invest in our pharmacare system. We need to invest in a childcare system. The Liberals had 13 years to put a childcare system together, and they didn't do it. The NDP will do it starting with this election. We have promised that we will start the process of putting a child care system in place that will cost no more than $15 a day. And there are lots of families in York South-Weston where the single parent can't afford to go to work because they can't afford $30,000 in child care fees when they only earn $27,000. Think of the math. You can't do it. What does that end up doing? They end up either, depending on their partner for their income, or they end up on welfare, which is a provincial expense. And the province is paying tremendous amounts into welfare now, and the city. We need to make sure that we have a system that works for everybody. And the system that works for everybody includes childcare, includes healthcare, includes pharmacare, and includes a government that actually cares about those things.
Stephen?
Oh, I mean, I was just going to say, the real problem I see here is that we've used these same policies for so many years now. Tax and spend, and invest in infrastructure and all these different projects. But look where it's gotten us, absolutely nowhere. And unemployment in York South-Weston is still terrible. I mean, we have so many people in this riding here who are struggling just to make ends meet. And we think that by building, infrastructure, building a bridge, or building a new train to the airport, that that's somehow going to help, the families who are struggling in York South-Weston. And I just don't agree with that.
John, I know you wanted to get in.
Yes, absolutely. Infrastructure is wonderful, but York South-Weston has its own special needs. It's a very diverse community. It's aging. We basically need jobs in that thing. I believe the federal government has a lot of data on new technology. We need new technology. We have to move forward. I mean, we've got so many stores. We've got lots of land available. We've got all kinds of buildings that are just virtually sitting there. With new technology, we can create new industries for the people in the area. We talk about letting, or creating daycare centers for people so they can get out to work. Where are they going to work at? There's no jobs available unless you have extreme education, and then you're fighting for a position. We have to build the jobs in the community to support the community.
No one's, I think the whole table is proposing the creation of jobs, but like I indicated, the infrastructure that Mr. Sullivan is talking about, the money simply isn't there because of this straitjacket of balanced budgets. So the NDP is trying to make these investments with Stephen Harper's budget, which simply isn't possible.
No, we don't have. We're not using Stephen Harper's
That's precisely
budget.
what you're
doing.
doing,
We're not.
because you're against running deficits at a time when Canadians need investment now. Like I said, you're talking about $3.6 billion for transit all over Canada over 10 years. That's a very small amount with respect. We are proposing $60 billion over 10 years. 20 of that $60 billion will be exclusive to transit. That's a real investment in infrastructure related to transit.
Okay, Mike, go ahead and rebut.
Well, the numbers don't add up in the Liberal platform because there's about $150 billion worth of promises, and there isn't $150 billion worth of income that's going to support it. If you want to make those kinds of promises, then you've got to raise taxes. That's the only way you can do that. We have a plan that involves different priorities. It is not our priority, like it was the provincial Liberals and the federal Liberals before them, to spend $1.5 billion building a transit system that nobody can take because it's too expensive. The airport rail link is going to cost $30 a ride. Nobody in York South-Weston takes that. The trains run empty every day. We in York South-Weston have been advocating for real local public transit, not the priorities of the federal and provincial Liberal government, who invested in this $1.4 billion in a train that nobody takes and that nobody can afford to take. So we have different priorities.
So why $3.6 billion over 10 years?
It isn't $3.6 billion over 10 years. No, I don't know where you're coming with those numbers. Well, that's not what it is.
That's the number that the NDP is
No, it is not $3.6 billion over 10 years. No, it is not. It is $1.5 billion a year, which is $15 billion over 10 years. I'm not sure where you're getting the 3.6 from unless you're making up numbers. That's not our number. Our number is that we will be investing significant money and have a strategy, one that actually builds public transit that people can use. We'll invest significant amount of money in cities, in housing. We will stop the hemorrhaging of the housing programs in this country, started by Paul Martin, who divested all of the public housing into the province that says, here, you look after it. We're not going to pay for it anymore. We're going to reverse that. We're going to actually stop the hemorrhaging. We're going to put money back into housing. We're going to build 10,000 housing units. I don't see how the Liberal government, which had a red book, remember, and those promises in that red book in 1993 actually didn't actually take place.
Okay, let's do this. Let's move on, because you did bring up transit, and all of you have said transit is an important issue in your riding. So why don't we talk about transit?
Sure.
And you know, the TTC is facing yet another budget shortfall. We heard them talk about that a few weeks ago. While it does remain the lowest subsidized public transit system in North America, we want to hear from you about what your party will do about transit funding in Toronto. So Ahmed, let's start with you, the Liberals.
I'm glad that you asked that question, because it's something that's really important to our party. It is central in our platform that we will invest $20 billion of our $60 billion infrastructure plan over 10 years. 20 billion will be dedicated to transit. And the difference between us and the NDP and the Conservatives is that that 20 billion will be dedicated money. It'll be sustained funding over 10 years so that folks can, municipalities can plan and provincial governments can plan ahead.
Okay,
and we won't micromanage the projects from
John.
Ottawa.
Well, the Green Party, we definitely want to invest in the TTC future plans of development. But at the same point, we would like to have a tighter rein on how the money's being spent. They introduced a super long streetcar, and then they had to turn around and redo all of the platforms. I mean, the planning was horrible. The waste was excessive. We definitely, you know, from the federal level, if we're going to invest money in TTC, we better have our auditors keep an eye on who's spending the money and where it's going.
Okay, John, let's go to Stephen next.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, transit is one of the biggest issues that Toronto's facing right now. And if you look at what governments have done in the past, we've increased spending, and we've basically thrown a ton of money at the TTC and at infrastructure to try to improve our transit infrastructure. And what's happened? It hasn't worked. And the gentleman to my right here, with all due respect, what they're proposing is to do the same thing that we've tried before, and it's failed. They want to go and throw even more money at a problem where it's not more money. We need to look at other solutions. And I think the private sector is where those solutions are going to be coming from.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Mike?
Well, the private sector is all well and good, but the private sector isn't the answer when it comes to public transit. There is no transit system on the planet that is private sector successful. There are governments in some countries who've tried to privatize transit, and they're moving back because the private sector cannot subsidize. It has to run at a subsidy. Anytime there's transit built in this country, there is not enough money to actually operate and maintain and build in the fare box. So governments around the world, except in Toronto, are investing in public transit. In Toronto, 80% of the operation of the TTC comes from the fare box. The rest comes from the City of Toronto.
Yes, and that's a good point, because in all of your answers, what we didn't hear about was sustainable funds for the City of Toronto, for the TTC transit. So the floor is open.
Well, that's actually what I was talking about. Our transit dedicated money, the 20 billion over 10 years, will be dedicated to transit, and it'll be sustainable, and it'll be long-term funding that municipalities can plan on. And so we're giving them money to plan ahead, and at the same time we're not micromanaging them the way the NDP and the Conservatives will with their funding. We won't tell the province and the municipalities where to build subways or trains and where to put buses. We respect them enough to know that they know their priorities locally more than the federal government, but we will be a partner on transit and provide long-term funding that they can actually plan around.
But that's not your history. The federal government told the City of Toronto that it was going to build, that the City of Toronto and the province of Ontario were going to build the airport rail link. It wasn't the City of Toronto's wish. It wasn't the City of Toronto's desire. The airport rail link was not something that the City of Toronto wanted. The Spadina subway extension was not something that the city was not their priority. Their number one priority is a relief line to downtown.
Which is why we'll respect their priorities.
But the provincial government and the federal government have already insisted on the priority of the provincial and federal governments being built first, the Spadina subway. The Scarborough subway and the the back and forth over whether it's a subway and it's an LRT, and it's the provincial Liberals that are doing this. It's either going to be an LRT or it's going to be a subway, and when the city decides one thing and the province says no, we're not going to do that. It's an example of exactly how the province, the Liberal province, micromanages.
Ottawa, and we will provide.
But that's not your history.
Funding.
Your history has been to micromanage. Your history has been to tell the cities what to do. We want to develop, and if you look back at Olivia Chow's public transit strategy bill, the idea was to create something that took the politics out of transit, that took the notion that we're pandering to a particular community because they're going to vote for us. We're not doing that. We want to make sure that transit is independent of politics, that the building of transit is done in a way that is clear, transparent, and it isn't done for political gain by anybody. We will commit to $1.3 billion a year to transit, in addition to the gas tax money that's already there, that Jack Layton was successful in putting in place, and in addition to the other monies that the Conservatives have already put aside. We are going to increase the money that is being given to the City of Toronto for transit, and the City of Toronto will be free to decide how best to use that money, as is now the case.
$3.6 billion over 10 years, with all due respect, is very small.
That's not our project is $1.3 billion a year over the next 20 years.
The plan indicates otherwise, sir.
Well, I'm reading from my plan. Go read the plan. It's on the web.
Francis, I think there's an issue going on here, because I mean, you know, the Liberals and NDP here, what they're saying, I mean, Mr. Hussen is promising $20 billion, which is all fair and good, but clearly that's not sustainable, because the Liberals are going to run $10 billion deficits just to do that. So that's definitely not sustainable. And then the NDP, like we said, at $3.6 billion, if that's not going to cut it, then what is going to cut it? We need to start looking at real alternatives that are going to work for Canadians. And I'll give you one example right here. Look at what Uber is doing in the city right now. I've talked to hundreds of people all across the city, and what they tell me is that a lot of them are not even using the TTC anymore. If they need to go from point A to point B, they'll call up an Uber on their smartphone and they'll get from point A to point B. A lot of times it can be cheaper and more cost effective to go down that route than taking the TTC, which has failed us, it's failed Torontonians, and it's failed all of us basically, you know, regardless of how many billions of dollars we spend on it, how, you know, regardless of how much we want to take the debt up to, if we want to take it from $600 billion to $700 billion, even $1 trillion, we can take the debt to whatever we want to take it to, but that's not going to solve our transit issues.
Well, I think young people in Canada are very worried about deficit. They are worried that they're going to be on the hook for the spending of the governments that have preceded them. Those young people are actually quite terrified of the fact that each of them owes several tens of thousands of dollars right now, and you add another $10 billion to that, and you're adding another $1,000 to every man, woman, and child in the country. It's not sustainable. And we have said that our priorities are different. We will take from the rich by cutting the CEO tax breaks. We will take from the corporations by raising their taxes slightly, not enough to chase them away, but by raising their taxes slightly. The banks don't need any more money in this country. The banks have lots of it. The bank's profits last year was $33 billion. That's $1,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country. Where did your $1,000 go? Where did my $1,000 go? To those banks' profits, not just revenue. That was profit. And so we need to give our head a shake and say, this has gone too far. Liberal and conservative tax cuts to big business have gone way too far. It hasn't attracted a single new job.
That's not true. We're proposing tax cuts to middle-class Canadians who need help the most, so that we can stir economic growth, stimulate economic growth. Secondly, you can't be obsessed with balanced budgets and then promise all these programs. It just won't work. You have to run a deficit, a small manageable deficit, at a time of very low interest rates, at a time of very low GDP to debt ratio. If you don't invest, if you don't make those overdue investments in infrastructure by running a modest deficits and borrowing money as a government to stimulate the economy and create jobs, when will you do it? So you're trying to do all these fantastic things that you're saying on Stephen Harper's budget. You have to run a deficit at a time of recession, otherwise you're talking about austerity. So the austerity has been tried in England, it hasn't worked. It leads to lower growth, lower unemployment. We've had a very sluggish economy over the last 10 years. And so what you're proposing to do is, by being obsessed with the balanced budget, immediately is you're going to not make the investments because the money simply isn't there, or you'll have to make cuts somewhere else, which you're not disclosing.
Well, let's focus back to transit as well, because all of the numbers that you've talked about is for a large pool of transit money, which has to be shared across this country.
Yes.
When it comes down to what Toronto's share would actually be, it will be substantially less than what all of you have talked about. Which party will be the champion for Toronto's TTC?
The best way to be a champion for Toronto's TTC is to respect local decision making by the relevant authorities. The pledge that our party is making is that at a time when they are prepared to make record investments in transit to the tune of $20 billion across Canada, they're also saying that they will not micromanage from Ottawa and respect the local authorities to do what is necessary in their view for transit.
But I don't trust the leopard to change his spots. The Liberal government has never let municipalities make their own decisions, either provincially or federally. The Liberal government in Ottawa divested itself of housing, just said, here, you take it, it's not our problem. The Liberal government in Ottawa cut healthcare budgets without saying, let's be a partner with you. They cut the healthcare budgets dramatically in the 90s, and only through the Romanow Commission has the money started to flow back, and now the Conservatives have cut it off again. We can't have a federal government making those decisions that are unilateral on behalf of the cities of this country. We have to be partners. We have to be able to sit down at the table with the provinces and the municipalities and say, what are your priorities, provincially and municipally, and let's find the funding to do it. We can't have the Stephen Harper approach where he promises Toronto all the money that was set aside in their budget, and then goes to Calgary and promises them half the money. How can you do that? You can't do that. You can't make promises, and we don't. We have costed our platform. We know where the money's coming from. The money is not coming from a deficit. It's not coming from raising taxes on individuals. It's not coming from raising fees on individuals, and it's not coming from cutting programs. It's coming from raising taxes on corporations. It's coming from changing the CEO tax loopholes so those very wealthy individuals can start paying taxes on their stock options. It's coming from cutting the income splitting program that is giving $2 billion to the richest Canadians, and it's coming from reassessing our priorities in the rest of the world. We don't need to be at war in Iraq and Syria and spending what will ultimately be billions of dollars.
Okay, we're going to talk about all that as well.
Yeah, okay.
So obviously the champion question didn't go too well, but let's try to move on to another question, and hopefully we'll get some answers there. So the next question is about our migrant crisis, which has challenged Europe this summer and has not left Canada untouched. Governments around the world have responded in many different ways to the tide of refugees. The current government of Canada has committed to resettling 10,000 Syrians by September 2016, as well as fulfilling an existing commitment to resettle 23,000 Iraqi refugees by the end of this year. Is this response the right one? What stance should Canada take on this issue? And Stephen, we'll begin with you. 30 seconds.
Thanks very much, Francis. I mean, clearly the Harper government has not taken leadership on this issue. Right now, what they've done is set up a point system where any immigrant coming into this country needs to pass some arbitrary tests just to make it into this country. We believe that we need to earn our reputation, which we had in the past, of being international peacekeepers. And what that means is that if there's an international crisis that is going on in the world, we need to open our borders up and allow people to come in. But we need to do it in a responsible manner. We need to do background checks, and we need to make sure that the people coming in are people who are going to contribute to the economy. But we can't go about what the Harper government's doing right now, where they have a point system, and it's been a disaster right now.
Thank you, Mike.
This government has been very, very restrictive on its immigration policy. I know that from the people that come to my office. People have terrible times bringing friends, relatives, or anybody to this country, whether it's through sponsorship or otherwise, and that's because there has been a tightening of the noose around Canada so that people from outside Canada can't come in. And that is no more evident than in Syria, than in the refugees that are coming from Syria who are trying to get to Canada and to other countries, and this government has only let in 151 so far. It is absolutely crazy. It is not Canada.
Thank you.
The Liberal Party has committed to bringing 25,000 Syrian refugees. In addition to that, the Liberal Party once has asked for a non-partisan approach to this issue and has called for a meeting between all three party leaders on this issue and the bringing of 10,000 Syrian refugees before December, and an overhauling of the immigration and refugee system to make it more humane and bring it back to bringing back Canada's reputation as a place for sanctuary.
Thank you. John?
Well, Canada definitely can provide a lot of help for the refugees. Canada itself needs a lot of young families. You know, they're ambitious, they will come here, they will build, they will contribute lots to this nation. Canada has lots to offer them, and I believe the refugees have lots to offer Canada.
Okay, thank you. Let's open it up for discussion, because this question really does go into and grow into a debate about our immigration system.
The Conservatives have made a mess of the immigration system for the last 9 years. They've disproportionately focused on temporary foreign workers. They've made it much harder for folks to gain a pathway to citizenship. They have made it really difficult for Canadians to sponsor their loved ones, family members, spouses. The backlog in immigration files is unacceptable. We intend to make real investments to deal with that backlog, but also restore Canada's humanitarian reputation by using the immigration system to address these inhumane practices.
Some of that backlog existed prior to the Conservatives taking office. The Conservatives themselves complained that the mess that they were left with from the Liberal government was such that there were backlogs that couldn't be managed, and they cut off. I don't agree with what they did, but they ended up cutting off thousands upon thousands of potential immigrants to Canada by changing the rules midstream and giving them their money back, essentially. And that was because the lists were huge. I know, because the people coming to my office have been trying to sponsor relatives and others to this country for, in some cases, 12 years. And that goes way back into the Liberal times. It's not, the Conservative government has made it worse. There's no question about that. The Conservative government has tightened up the immigration policies and has basically been a party that believes in scaring Canadians, that if the Canadians are scared, they'll vote for Conservatives, and that's no way to run a government. We don't need to be, the politics of fear has no business in this country, and we don't campaign on fear. Nobody has a platform of fear, but that seems to be where the Conservatives are coming from.
I mean, right now, when we're talking about foreign affairs, let's look at the bigger picture here. I mean, many moons ago, Canada was viewed upon on the international stage as an international peacekeeper. Look what's going on right now. I mean, right now, Canada has joined the US-led mission with aerial strikes over ISIS targets in both Iraq and in Syria. And at the same time, we have Canadian forces who are currently in northern Iraq training Kurdish rebels to fight against ISIS. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it goes against everything that we've ever fought for in terms of freedom in this country. I mean, these missions that we're taking part in right now, they're costing us billions of dollars. They're putting our men and women in uniform at risk, and they're not making us any safer. We need to bring our Canadian forces at home, protect domestic interests, and that's what we need to do, and earn back our reputation as international peacekeepers, because quite clearly under the Harper Conservatives, we've lost that reputation.
I think we all agree that we've lost our reputation as peacekeepers. We used to have several thousand peacekeepers at various locations in the world on the basis of UN recommended missions. And now we have, I think, 84 total soldiers who are on peacekeeping missions. And we've said no to the UN on a number of occasions, and we've lost our status at the UN. We need to rebuild that status. We need to come back to being a peaceful, peacekeeping nation, which is what Canada had a great reputation for, and we've lost lost our way in the world. I'm not sure that that the Conservative base agrees, but the Conservative base is only a small part of what is Canada.
But in the fight against ISIS, is that something that Canada should be directly involved in with troops?
I think the question is not whether they should be involved, at least as far as I'm concerned, but how they should be involved. And so my party's position is that the best way to be involved is to train local forces in order to defend their own country and build their own future, but also provide humanitarian assistance in which we're really good at doing.
When we went to Iraq in the last parliament, our Paul Dewar, our critic for foreign affairs, was asked very specifically of the government, what is it Canada should be doing? And the answer he got was humanitarian aid. That's what we need. We need tents, we need food, we need clothing, we need water, we need shelter, we need money. They didn't ask for bombs. They didn't ask for training of their fighters. None of that was what they needed. What they needed was a way to deal with the enormous problems of the refugee crisis that is facing those countries, with actual millions. Like the population of the city of Toronto and more are sitting in tents in the desert awaiting an unknown fate, and they've been there for years. It's not just not just since ISIS took place. It's been since the Syrian government decided to wage war on its own people. And now we have the very ironic position of actually going in, bombing in Syria to kind of maybe support Bashar al-Assad, but we're really not supporting him, but it's very, very strange. And we're also assisting in training groups that any other day would be classified as terrorist groups by the Canadian government. The some of the Kurdish fighters belong to a party that believes that there should be a separate Kurdistan, and Canadian government has said that's a terrorist organization. So we're assisting terrorist organizations, but what are we doing over there? And we have not done anything to make the world safer.
John?
Well, basically what Canada needs to do is bring back the troops back to Canada, reassess why we're there, and why our troops probably should be retrained to provide humanitarian care. We have the resources, we have the money, we have the food. Why we assess all our possible requirements of the countries. The migrants that are going to all these countries need the help. You know, they're being overwhelmed. Canada should be over there with funds, with our first aid, with medical care, education, that assists these nations that are in need. While we're there, we can also start processing the thousands of individuals so that they have an opportunity to come to this nation. We need them, but we need them prepared to come to Canada to be able to assist Canada as we assist them. It's a two-way street.
Okay, let's move on to our next question now. And taxes, always an issue in every election campaign. In this election, we have seen proposals to tinker with taxes for small and large businesses, to lower personal taxes for some and increase them for others, and to raise revenues by raising sin taxes on things like alcohol and tobacco. So some critics say our tax system needs an overhaul to make it simpler and more fair. What do you see as the priority for improving our tax system? And Mike, you can begin this answer.
Our personal income tax system is okay as it is. It has its flaws. We will be looking at all of the deductions that are there now, particularly for the very wealthy. But it's the corporate income tax system. We have seen a shifting of the burden of taxation in Canada from large corporations to persons. And we need to put that back on an even keel. We now have one of the lowest corporate income tax rates on the planet. And all that has done is meant that our citizens are being taxed more.
Okay.
If your concern is the disproportionate taxation of people in Canada, then you would get behind the Liberal plan to cut taxes in a significant way for middle-class families. They're the ones who are disproportionately overtaxed, and we want to remove some of that burden away from them and onto those who can afford to pay just a little bit more, so that those who are overtaxed can prosper.
John?
Yeah. Well, right now the corporations' taxation rate is way too low. The individuals will be happy to continue paying the tax rates that they are paying, provided that we're willing to give them a little bit more. I mean, guaranteed income, farmer care, all those additional things, they'd be happy to pay taxes. Those who do not earn income, of course, don't pay taxes. The corporations have to take responsibility for the individuals and pay a little bit more.
Okay, thank you, John. Steve?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Libertarian Party has a concrete plan to reduce taxes for all Canadians. And we're not going to do like what some of the other parties are going to do and reduce taxes for some subsets of the population and increase taxes on other subsets of the population. We want to reduce taxes for everyone. So we're going to have a 15% flat tax for all Canadians. We're also, like I said before, increase the personal income tax exemption at the federal level from $11,500 to $17,300. And I mean, that's definitely going to go to help the students, the seniors, the people right now who need the tax relief the most. And it's going to make our economy more competitive.
Okay, thank you. And the floor is open.
I mean, if I could just say one other thing, and I hate to bring this up, but the Liberals right now are saying that they're going to reduce taxes for middle-class families, and quite frankly, it's just not true. What they're aiming to do right now, and it's in their platform, is to take the tax bracket, which is from $45,000 to $90,000, and they're going to reduce that tax bracket from 22% down to 20.5%. So it's a 1.5% decrease, but it's only on income that you earn over $45,000. So for all, the majority of people in York South-Weston who are earning less than $45,000, you're not seeing any tax relief. In the meanwhile, the Liberals plan on increasing CPP contributions, increasing payroll taxes. So quite frankly, under a Liberal administration, if you're a middle-class family in this country, your taxes are going to be going way up.
That's not true. The tax cut is real for middle-class families, but that's not the only thing we're doing. We are revamping the child care benefit program and bringing forward a new child care benefit program called the Canada Child Benefit, which will see more money in pockets for folks with children. We will stop sending child benefit checks to millionaires, which the NDP will continue to do. I don't understand why. So we will remove those checks from millionaires and take it to and give it to and boost the benefit for folks who really need it the most. That, coupled with the tax cut for working class and middle class families, would make a real dent in taxation in York South-Weston.
I mean, the math is simple. The average Canadian worker in this country makes $50,000 a year. Under the Liberals' plan, they would only receive that tax break on the marginal $5,000 above $45,000. So if you look at a 1.5% decrease in taxes on $5,000 of your income, it's a $75 tax break. It's peanuts. Meanwhile, they're going to be increasing payroll taxes, so the taxes are going to be going way up. What we need to do is reduce taxes for all Canadians, and that's what we plan to do. 15% flat tax is going to reduce taxes for every single tax bracket, and that's going to make our economy more competitive. And we're also going to, like I said before, increase the personal income tax exemption, and we're going to have more income tax credits and deductions, $4,000 each, for children, students, seniors, and those with disabilities. That is a real concrete plan that is going to make our economy a lot more competitive in the long run.
One of the groups that is doing the worst in our riding are seniors. We have many seniors who tell me at the door, they can't afford food. They are going to food banks. They can't afford to eat. And we have promised to bring every senior out of poverty. We have promised to assign $400 million to raising the guaranteed income supplement so that every senior in this country will no longer have to go to food banks. We need to act now to make sure that people have enough to eat, to make sure that people can actually access the myriad of benefits that are available to them. And taxation isn't the only issue. Taxation is an issue, and it's always an issue in elections, and everybody promises to lower this, and then look what Dalton McGuinty did when he was first elected. I promised no new taxes. The first thing he did was introduce a healthcare tax. And that tax was structured in such a way that the rich didn't pay it. They paid a proportionately less amount of money. We know what happens when the Liberals make a promise. They signal like they're going to turn left, but then they turn right. And all that does is create accidents on the highways. Let's make sure that we are, the NDP has balanced budgets more than any other party. We have successfully run governments in 6 of the 10 provinces. We are prepared to make sure that our Canadian children are not saddled by mountains of debt as we go forward. And that includes making sure that we live within our means. Living within our means is part of what we do. We will not raise any personal income taxes. We will close loopholes to make sure that people aren't sheltering tax money offshore that they should be paying taxes on. The Liberals and the Conservatives are not doing that. The Liberals and the Conservatives want the corporate Canada to continue to be subsidized at the expense of everybody else. We believe that that gravy train should stop.
The issue here is having the resources to do what you say you will do. At the end of the day, if anybody is moving to the right, it's the NDP. they intend to do all these social programs and invest in infrastructure and housing and so on with Stephen Harper's budget. They are obsessed with balancing the budget at a time when we're in a recession. The key here is to stimulate growth and create jobs, not to be obsessed with the bottom line. If you can run modest deficits and balance the budget in 3 years, then a lot of economists actually agree with that. They say that that's a better plan than cutting services and running an austerity platform at a time of a recession. If you're talking about Dalton McGuinty's health tax, it's because he was left with a $6 billion hole by the provincial Tories, which he wasn't aware of. But coming back to the issue of the feds, if you want to go back in history, it's the NDP government that brought down a Liberal government that was on the verge of implementing a national childcare program.
On the verge
and a
of
Kelowna
13
Accord.
years.
And
13
so
years they promised these things.
You brought down the
had
Liberals,
a majority government
and
never
now
did
you've had 9 years of Conservative government that has slashed and burned everything. So the NDP is in no position to talk about that.
And the Liberals have supported that Conservative government slash and burn for much of that time. When they were in minority, it was the Liberals that voted with the Conservative government time and time and time again to prop them up. We are not looking at a reformed Liberal Party. We're looking at a Liberal Party desperate to seek votes by making promises that they know they're not going to keep, and by making promises that will require the taxpayers of the future to pay for the sins of the present. We need to make sure that we actually live within our means, and that means changing some of the priorities, changing the priorities that the Canadians maybe don't agree with. Those priorities of giving tax money, your tax money and my tax money, to profitable oil companies in the tar sands is something we are going to stop. There's $2 billion a year, almost $2 billion a year going to those oil companies. We're going to stop it. We're going to make sure that Canadians are safe when they live next to a rail corridor. The rail corridor in my community has big oil trains going by it every day, and I hear them. I live close enough that I can hear and feel those oil trains going by. We need to turn back the clock on some of the Liberal and Conservative means of letting big business regulate itself. The rail companies haven't done a very good job of it. We're going to turn back the clock on those Liberal and Conservative plans.
Mr. Sullivan, if you are concerned about giving corporations a break on their taxes or giving them tax money, you would support the cancelling of the F-35. Your leader has flip-flopped on that. He said he'll cancel it a while ago. Recently, when the Liberals came out with a promise to cancel the F-35, what did Mr. Mulcair do? He said he'll keep the F-35.
No, he didn't. What he said was Canada needs a replacement fighter for its current fighter jets. Even as peacekeepers, we need fighter jets. The fighter jet that we currently have is obsolete, is coming to the end of its life.
But the F-35 doesn't work.
And the F-35 doesn't work.
It has a
we
single
haven't said
engine.
We're not buying an F-35. What we're saying we're going to buy is a replacement.
Your leader opposed Mr. Trudeau's position of cancelling the F-35. At the end of the day, that's what he did.
No, he didn't. I disagree completely.
Well, from what I hear about the F-35, and I haven't seen or heard of all the specs, it sounds like just one great big money pit.
Yes.
Something which the Liberals have a tendency to want to throw money at.
We're going to cancel it. How are we going to throw money at it? We're going to cancel it. It's the Tories that have been throwing money at it.
You can't cancel it without a plan to replace the planes that we have. And that's what we've said. There needs to be a plan to replace the planes that we have, whether that's with a French jet, whether that's with a Swedish jet, whether that's with another jet that hasn't been built yet. We can't be a peacekeeper in this world without fighter jets. That's part of the job.
There are many fighter jets in the market that can do the work.
Exactly.
The Eurofighter can do it. The FA-18. Australia has backed off from the
But you
F-35.
can't just say, I'm canceling, and not say what else you're
we can
doing.
say that. That's the first step. Otherwise, you'll be you'll throw money at the same problem.
Steve. I just heard a remarkable statement, Francis. I just heard from Mr. Sullivan that we can't be international peacekeepers without fighter jets. I mean, really, do we need fighter jets to be international peacekeepers? I think that's ridiculous, to be honest with you.
Well, that was part of our role in Bosnia. As peacekeepers, we used fighter jets. It's part of what happened. It's part of what transpired. We went there, and we do need to have an equipped army. We do need to have an equipped military. We can't have a military that is toothless or that has moth-eaten tents. It's just not in the NDP's plans to starve our military the way the Liberals did over their 13 years of power. But at the same time, we can't be spending the kinds of money that the Conservatives have set for the F-35. I agree that the F-35 is not a bargain. The F-35 was a scheme by a bunch of very large, big corporations in the U.S. to get the world to buy onto a fighter jet that they would make a lot of money on. That's not something that we have supported at any time.
So why wouldn't you clearly say that you will cancel the F-35?
Because we are in a process where we have to figure out what the next fighter is. We cannot say.
It's an obvious. If you won't cancel the F-35, I don't know what you will. That's a money pit. It hasn't worked. It has a single engine.
Absolutely.
It doesn't work in Canada's north,
you.
And it failed a dogfight recently against inferior jets. The F-35 needs to be cancelled, and your party should come out and do the right thing and say that they'll cancel the F-35.
What we'll do is buy the right jet.
Okay, we're going to leave it there on the taxes discussion.
Yes, it didn't go very well in
about
Texas.
F-35, but we flew off in another direction. That's okay. It is time now, though, to move on to our closing statement. So we know these will be focused for sure, and this will be done in the reverse order of the opening statement. So, Stephen, you can begin.
Thanks very much, Francis. Folks, the Toronto Blue Jays have given Canadians something to be proud of, but our government has not. Many years of failed tax and spend policies have gotten us to where we are now, over $600 billion in debt, and our economy is no better off because of it. In a few short moments, each of the gentlemen to my right will try to explain to you why their version of increasing taxes and spending and ballooning our debt will be best for you and your family. It won't be. On October 19, let's vote to take more power out of the hands of the bureaucrats in Ottawa and back into our hands. Let's vote for liberty on October 19. Vote for the Libertarian Party of Canada.
Thank you, John.
Well, thank you, Francis. The Green Party believes in trying to build a sustainable economy. The only way that's going to happen is that every individual in this nation looks at the possibilities. They have to look at their neighbors. They have to look at the world. As far as the Green Party is concerned, the three parties that are supposedly leading this election have turned their back on the citizens of this country. The Conservative parties have been running amok. Their MPs have been doing what? I don't know. They're just saying the Conservatives. Well, they were there too.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on to Ahmed.
Thank you, Francis. As a housing advocate, as a lawyer, as a community builder, as someone who has experience empowering communities and running a small business in York South-Weston, I urge you to vote for me on October the 19th and vote for the Liberal Party of Canada so that we can bring real change to York South-Weston. Real change to York South-Weston will not come from the Conservatives or from the NDP that is in a straitjacket that cannot make the investments necessary for residents in York South-Weston.
Thank you. And Mike.
I'm your neighbor. I live in York South-Weston. I know what York South-Weston needs. It needs jobs. It needs transit. It needs housing. We're not going to get jobs, transit, and housing under the plans of the other parties. Not in York South-Weston. We've seen what Liberal governments can do as far as transit in York South-Weston is concerned. We got a train nobody can afford to take that pollutes the air they breathe. I will ensure that York South-Weston gets the things it needs, and I will ensure that York South-Weston gets the best representative it can in Ottawa.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you to all of the candidates for coming in and sharing your views on the issues. The decision is yours now. So thanks so much for joining us on the local campaign. Airtimes for other debates can be found at rogerstv.com. I'm Francis D'Souza. Bye for now.